Okay, welcome to Transmission 23. Today about Bitcoin mining, cloud mining, and we have a special guest, Ryan Scott from Knights of the Satoshi. Hi, Ryan.
How are you today? Thanks for having me.
Great, yeah. So we're live on World Crypto Network. I'd like to remind everyone to check out worldcryptonetwork.com, also to subscribe and thumbs up this video. And so, Ryan, what is Bitcoin mining?
So Bitcoin mining, to simplify it for most, it is a process that helps to secure the Bitcoin network to be able to basically create this currency and distribute the currency in a fair, decentralized way, as well as processing the transactions that are going on in the ecosystem of Bitcoin. So
Okay,
that's a very simple definition of it, without going into the mathematical formulas and exactly what happens in Bitcoin mining behind the scenes. So.
right. Okay, well that sounds good. Yeah, but sometimes I really do have people asking me, well, how does it work, Theo? You know, what are they doing? Can you just give us a quick overview of, what the ASIC chips are doing or what the GPUs and the CPUs were doing too? It's basically the same thing. What are they trying to do?
So they're basically trying to solve a mathematical problem, and it gets down to, yeah, exactly how many zeros. There is a mathematical solution to the problem, and basically that problem is designed to increase in difficulty over time, so that the bitcoins are being distributed at a fair rate of about 10 minutes on average. Right? So what happens when you're Bitcoin mining? You're actually basically solving a mathematical problem, and while you're solving that problem, you're verifying the transaction. You're basically trying to find what's called a nonce, and you're doing all this processing, and you basically are just throwing a whole bunch of work at this mathematical problem, and you're submitting a bunch of work, and you might be right or you might be wrong, and you could get really lucky and actually solve the problem faster than that 10 minutes, but on average the solution is found every 10 minutes.
All right, well that sounds great, but how does all this mathematical competition secure the network, really?
So essentially the miners are able to compete against each other, and essentially when you send a Bitcoin transaction, there has to be a 51% consensus on that transaction. So if I'm controlling, say, 5% of the mining power, you've got 5%, and we've distributed at an even rate, and there's not a 51% control over it, when you send me a Bitcoin, everyone in the network has to agree on it. And if somebody controls 51% of that, then they can start playing with the transactions in the block and start verifying or denying other people's transactions.
So the more people that are trying to solve the mathematical problem, the less likely it is that one pool or one person can get 51%. Is that
And the
correct?
more secure the network becomes, yes.
Okay, great. So how did you get involved in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining?
Well, I used to work for Future Shop back in, well, I worked for them for about 4.5 years, and always been into technology. And I heard about it through my father, who heard about it through my cousin. He didn't even know what the name of it was. It was just this new technology that's out, and I dove right into the internet trying to find out exactly what this decentralized currency was. Managed to stumble upon Bitcoin, studied it for a couple weeks, found out mining, decided to go out and buy 3 graphics cards, and jump headfirst in before the Bitcoin reward was cut in half. And when I did get involved, Bitcoin was probably around $10 to $13. I think it was trading in those ranges there. And I had invested about $900 at the time just to play around in the graphics cards. I was mining maybe 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, well, 1.5 Bitcoins a day roughly. And at the time, everybody was saying, oh, you're never going to make your money back, you're wasting your money. And at the time, if I had sold those Bitcoins for $10, then I would not have made my money back. But I was actually able to hold on to those Bitcoins. The block reward got cut in half. And March of 2013, price went to $100, and I made a decent return on my investment at that point. So I was more or less investing into the ideology and the technology itself. I was looking at it as a long-term thing. I really believed in the Bitcoin network and decentralizing the banking system. And you don't realize, I find in Canada anyway, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world. I know some places like Cyprus, they're much more open to Bitcoin because of some of the problems that they have. But in Canada, I find that the consumer level market doesn't understand the banking system as much because it's very easy to do banking in Canada. But when you start dealing in business and you start dealing overseas, you begin to realize how valuable this technology is. And that's why I really dove headfirst into it.
All right, great. So it sounds like you also started out mining at home, right?
I did.
Yeah. With you talked about GPU, you invested in some GPUs, which are graphic cards that are
Yeah.
usually used for, really powerful gaming with lots of graphics. And, it was popular to mine at home, and then ASICs came on the scene in 2013. And now a lot of people are saying home mining is dead. It's just not worth it. Nobody's going to do it anymore. You've got these big boxes that are kind of loud and not really, even meant for a basement necessarily. So do you think home mining is dead?
I don't believe home mining is dead. I think there's still going to be those diehards, the guys like me that are loving to play around with this hardware and the technology and kind of get into it and learn about it. It's the way like you start to understand the system a little bit more when you play around with this hardware. I do believe that it's going to become a more competitive space. Now, going back to the GPU days, I remember when the block reward got cut in half, and a lot of people were concerned that when the block reward got cut in half, they weren't going to be able to afford to pay their electricity bill at the $10 Bitcoin rate. So I saw it back then where people thought, oh, the days of graphics cards are done. Then the price went to $100, and people continued to mine with their graphics cards until some more of the ASICs came out. So I think we go through these waves of home mining, and then people turning their machines off, and then all of a sudden the price goes up, and it's profitable to mine again, and people jump back in. So I think right now we are going to see a lot more centralization. But I think long term, if we can work on investing money into the technology behind mining, then we'll be able to give home miners a chance again. Now, that's why we've kind of come up with our co-location business, Liberté Hosting, to be able to offer people the ability to still purchase this hardware and get cheap hosting rates, cheap electricity, so that they can still continue to mine themselves and have control over their machine.
All right, great. So you talked about improving mining technology that could allow people to mine at home again, I guess if they're very efficient miners or smaller and efficient. How can P2P pools, P2P pools, peer-to-peer pools, help prevent centralization or just help make the Bitcoin ecosystem more healthy? And can you just briefly describe the difference between a peer-to-peer pool and a typical mining pool?
So back would have been August or September of 2013 when I started playing around with P2 Pool. And P2 Pool is a decentralized pool that allows miners to control the pool themselves, but also work together in a larger pool. So what you have with these centralized pools, back when I was started mining, I was on 50 BTC, which ended up getting hacked, and that's another story. But they used to charge, I believe it was a 3% fee for mining. So I looked at that as, well, I'm mining all this Bitcoin, I'm putting in all this work, and I understand they're running the servers, but if I control my own pool, then I'm going to be able to not charge myself a fee, or I can charge myself a fee and keep it. So I looked into P2 Pool, and I really liked the idea that it was going to help to decentralize things, but still give the miners the ability to not have so much variance. Because the reason that everybody pools their mining resources together is that if you have a very small amount of mining power, it's very, very risky to try to do solo mining. When you're doing solo mining, it's like playing the lottery. You're just throwing numbers out there and hoping that you win a block. When you pool your resources together and put your mining power together, you have less variance. So you're going to get more payouts. They're going to be smaller, but they're going to be more consistent. So the benefit with P2 Pool is that you can still be considered like a solo miner where you control your own pool and you actually run the full Bitcoin node, which is going to help the system because that's a big problem that we have right now. But you're able to run your own pool, and then that small pool that you're running connects with thousands of other little pools. And then as one big pool, you're working together. The benefit of that is that the pool operators cannot skim off the top. Because right now you're submitting a bunch of work to these centralized pools, and they're telling you, oh, we made X amount of Bitcoins today. You don't know if they're, skimming a little bit here or there. There's no real way to verify that. With P2 Pool, you can't adjust the share chain. So P2 Pool uses its own blockchain. It's called the share chain, and the blocks in P2 Pool have 30-second block times. So they're a lot faster. You do get a lot more rejects and stuff like that in the shares, but over time, the variance and everything else levels out, and you end up making roughly the same, sometimes more, because there are pools out there that do a pay per share model. So you get 100% pay per share, but you get 100% no matter what. With P2 Pool, there's weeks where we have 200% luck. So if we were only supposed to mine 4 Bitcoins that week, and we have 200% luck, that means we mined 8 Bitcoins because the luck was twice as good as what is predicted. It tends to level out, though, where you get 60% luck one week, 200% luck the other week, and it levels out to about an average of 100 to 110%.
Okay, great. So you brought up a few points there. First of all, about running full nodes. So why is that a problem? And just tell us, first of all, for people that are unsure, what is a full node?
So a full Bitcoin node is the original Bitcoin wallet that was released by Satoshi Nakamoto. And originally the design was that everybody ran this client or this wallet on their computer, and the CPU would allow processing of transactions on a peer-to-peer level. So in the beginning, this was the only wallet that was available. Now we have a whole bunch of wallets that are coming out, and people aren't running full Bitcoin clients. They're considered light wallets, or there's a couple other names for them. The problem with that is that we get more and more centralization by not running these full nodes. So if there's, say, only a handful, let's say 7 big companies, and they're the only ones running these nodes, because when you're submitting work to a pool, they then have to transfer that work from the pool to the actual Bitcoin node, the actual full client. So if we have only 7 of these Bitcoin nodes running, then it just takes 7 of these guys working together, and 4 out of those 7 guys to cooperate together to get a 51% attack on the network. So even if you aren't mining, just running one of these nodes at home is going to help to an extent. It also helps to distribute the blockchain to all the other people that are trying to download the blockchain. The less nodes that are on the network, the slower the download of that blockchain becomes, because you need to connect to peers, just like in Napster and BitTorrent. You're connecting to a bunch of peers and taking small bits of the blockchain from each one of these peers. So not having full nodes running is not a good thing, and that's why I do like P2 Pool, because you are forced to use the full blockchain, or the full node. Now, the problem with that is it does require a lot of system resources, and because it requires an immense amount of system resources, a lot of people don't run it at home themselves, and they choose to go with a pool operator. So that's one of the things we need to work on, is a way to make it more simple, easy for people to set up a P2 Pool node. And there is some inefficiencies that need to be worked on with P2 Pool as far as how the share chain works.
All right. You also mentioned the word skimming, and I'm not sure if it's what you mean is exactly related, but about the transactions that are written into the blockchain. So, from what I understand, the miners decide what transactions to write in the blockchain, and it's not forced. So, theoretically, if I'm a solo miner, or if I'm a mining pool, I decide if this transaction is written in the blockchain or not. So I don't have to write 100 or 1,000 or I don't know however many is possible in a block. It's free will of the miner to do this, and the incentive, part of the incentive is collecting the fees that we're paying per transaction is to write them in, but it's not mandatory. So I could solve a block with 0 transactions in theory, and I believe in the end of 2013 or beginning of 2014, there were a few really weird ones where I had 1 or 2 transactions in the block, and it was a little weird. And I think that you or someone else was talking about how some of the pools have strategies to, I don't know how to explain it, not share the information about how many transactions were in the block, or, I mean, there's different ways because I might save, some milliseconds by not writing so many transactions. There's must be like a sweet spot of how many transactions, and I just wanted you to comment about that because I don't think people really understand that the miners decide what transactions are written in the blockchain, right?
The people that are mining with a pool operator and not controlling their own pool like they can in P2 pool, you're 100% right. They have no power over what transactions they are submitting or confirming. It really comes down to the pool operator. So if you're running your own P2 pool node, you can actually go into the Bitcoin wallet configuration file, and you can set your maximum block size, you can set your minimum transaction fee, and you can do a couple other cool things that allow you to control which transactions you're ultimately accepting. Now, when you mention these other pool operators, what it is ultimately, as a larger pool or anybody that has a significant amount of processing power, they can try and solve a block, and if they solve a block, they can actually withhold that solution for 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes longer if they choose, but it's a little more risky because if somebody solves that before you, then they would lose that reward. So they try to hold it back for a couple of minutes so that they can start working on the next block and get that 2 to 3 minute head start. So that's why you notice it quite often on blockchain.info. Sometimes I'm just sitting there watching the blocks come in, and you'll notice some of these pools are solving 2 blocks in a row. Sometimes that's just pure luck. Sometimes I do believe that's probably because they're holding back the one solution and then starting to work on the second one, and maybe just out of luck they find it and then release both of them at the same time. There's some, there has been talk of that. Now, with regards to the block sizes, that is a huge concern right now. Now, Gavin is actually trying to increase block sizes, but one of the biggest issues is that most of these mining pools aren't even allowing the maximum block size of 1 megabyte. So he wants to increase the block size by 50% per year roughly, or it'll work similar to how the difficulty algorithm works. But even if we increase it under the current algorithm, people aren't going to allow the maximum block size because of the inefficiencies in the way that blocks propagate throughout the network. So when you're trying to solve a block and you're solving this math problem, when you find the solution, you've got to then broadcast that solution with all of the transactions that you have in your mempool. When you broadcast that block with all those transactions in it, if you have a block size of say 1 megabyte, and one of these other pool operators or one of these other miners finds this exact same solution, but they have a block size that is maybe a quarter of the size, or sometimes you see 100 kilobyte blocks, it's going to travel, because of the variables in data and technology, it's going to travel through the network a lot faster than, say, my block. So if their block or their solution gets to 51% of the miners before my block, even though I found it first, then consensus comes together and their solution, they get the reward for their solution. So right now we have a problem where I personally increased it to the 1 megabyte block size because I'm thinking with P2 pool, we get the transaction fees. When you're operating a P2 pool node, you as a massive pool there, they get split. All the transaction fees get split amongst everybody in P2 pool. Well, I'm thinking, oh, well, let's get as many transactions in there as possible so we get a bigger reward. Well, then I found out about this, and unfortunately, I've had to reduce the block sizes so that we can compete with these larger pools. Now, Gavin is working on both increasing the block size, and he's also looking at switching up some of the algorithms so that when I solve a block, most of the miners out there have in their memory pool a list of all the transactions. So I don't need to send all the transactions with my block solution throughout the network, which is what slows it down. I can just send the block header with the solution and an index of all the transactions. When these miners take that block solution and go to verify it, they say, oh, well, here's all the transactions. I already have those, and maybe I'm missing one or two. And then they have to pull those from the network. So from my understanding, and I've been doing a lot of reading into this, is that the blocks will actually travel, larger blocks will actually travel faster than the current smaller blocks. So these pools, although not forced to actually upgrade, will actually have a disadvantage if they don't upgrade to the newer algorithm or newer block solution or propagation solution that Gavin is working on. So I'm very excited for that when it comes out, because the P2 pool, the more transactions we can fit into a block, the more of a reward we can get. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because it was about a year ago, and when all the craziness was happening and everybody was buying Bitcoin, Bitcoin went to $1,000. Unfortunately, somebody had made it. Well, it was great for the miners. It was unfortunate for whoever did this, but they had actually made a transaction fee of 20 Bitcoin. And that transaction fee was divvied up amongst all the P2 pool miners. So I actually saw my reward come in. It was double of what our normal reward was. I'm like, okay, what's this? And I looked into it, and it was actually a block that was 40 Bitcoin. And this is when the block reward was only 25. So somebody had paid a 20 Bitcoin transaction fee, and that went to the miners. So it's I do personally like the transaction fees as long term. That's what's going to keep us afloat. So we need to work on that and figure out how we can increase those transaction fees, but keep the actual cost per transaction down.
So this 20 Bitcoin transaction fee was just a mistake by someone, you think?
I do believe so.
Okay.
You can actually do that through different ways. So.
What about the part of the proposal that Gavin has proposed that it raises the block size by 50% every year, or you said it's based on maybe how many transactions or how many blocks are solved. Do
Yep.
you see that as a? I mean, it just seems like it just gets bigger, bigger, and bigger. Could it go back down too? I have not read the proposal in detail. I'll come clean, but it just seems like that just would go on forever. I don't know if that's really the best solution, to just have it get bigger and bigger.
I saw a tweet from Gavin recently, and I didn't get through his entire blog post, but it did mention, I believe there's going to be a cap on it, so there will be an upper limit. Now, with regards to how it's going to increase, it's very similar to the difficulty. So essentially, how Bitcoin works is every 2016 blocks, it looks at what the average block time was. So if the block time was, it's supposed to be 10 minutes, but if the average block time over the course of 2016 blocks was 5 minutes, that means in order to get the block times back up to the 10-minute average that it should be, we need to increase the difficulty by 50%. So I believe he's going to be working out some sort of mathematical formula to be based on blocks and possibly transaction fees and a couple other variables to increase the block size as it needs to increase. And I do believe there will be an upper limit.
Okay, great. Just want to remind our viewers, if you have questions, you can click the overlay on the video and you can come in and ask us questions, and we'll be answering them at the end of the video. All right, well, Bitcoin mining requires a lot of energy. Do you think that Bitcoin should change its algorithm or consensus system to something more energy efficient, like proof of stake, distributed proof of stake. I don't know. There's a lot of other algorithms to prevent ASICs like X11, etc. Does this make sense, or and could Bitcoin switch to another algorithm, and should it, or is proof of work the way to go?
I don't think anyone knows right now. I think we are still, one of the things Gavin likes to say a lot is, and a lot of people like to say, is that we are still in the beta stages of the Bitcoin software. It's still not even version 1.0 yet. So I think what's great is that we have all these other cryptocurrencies out there, and without having to change Bitcoin right now, we can actually test all these other algorithms and see what's going to be the best solution. I think what we're going to find is that we need to maybe invest. We've invested a lot of money into ASICs, into the development of ASICs. One of the things our company is trying to do is, you're right, it is very, it does consume a lot of energy, and we're trying to use green energy, renewable energy, and then repurpose the excess heat that's coming out of these machines, and try to repurpose it so that we're 100% green. And that is what we can do right now. I think long term there needs to be more money invested into technologies that can maybe help with that and hopefully reduce energy costs, and maybe we'll create something that can help the rest of the world with energy issues that we have in this world, because there is a lot, and we're polluting the world with a lot of carbon gases and stuff, and that's what we're trying to avoid with our company by using the hydroelectric electricity that we have here.
Okay,
So
so
again, with the algorithm stuff, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be changed in the next 2 to 4 years. I think we're going to have to let the other coins kind of dish it out and see what happens. But I know there's still some issues with proof of stake. It's a great idea, but there's almost, I like the pure coin idea with the hybrid, and that's an interesting one.
okay, great. I have a question. Could mining pools help with microtransactions and agree to write zero transaction fee transactions into the blockchain as a pool? Or do you have any ideas how we could send fee microtransactions on the blockchain without using a third party?
You definitely could. Long term, I think as the costs, right now I don't think microtransactions are possible. The cost is too high. There's other options out there that are better for it. I think long term, with Moore's law increasing, our cost of bandwidth and storage going down constantly, with some of these new technologies like MadeSafe coming out, we might even see an even better reduction in cost for some of these resources, being able to purchase the resources from them. I think at that point we will be able to do microtransactions. Currently, under the system that we have and the technology that we have, it's not necessarily possible with Bitcoin. But the zero transaction fees, that's a very interesting one that you mentioned with the pool operators. Because essentially, yes, the pool operators could say, you know what, we're going to accept zero transaction fees all day long. That's up to them, and that comes down to the Bitcoin configuration file. So ultimately, if you're running a P2 pool node, you could go into the configuration file and say, yes, I'm going to accept that. Now, you've also got to have enough mining power to get the block reward and confirm those transactions in that block. So that requires a lot of money to get there, and then you might not want to be accepting those transactions that are zero sum. So that's a tough question. Is there a solution that's going to come out in the future? I do believe so. I think we need to come up with something.
Okay, great. Well, tell us a little bit about your company. You already mentioned that you guys are trying to be green. So I've got Knights of the Satoshi and Liberty Mining. Tell us what they are, what inspired you to do Knights of the Satoshi, and yeah, just tell us a little bit about what you do.
So Knights of Satoshi was inspired by the G-hash incident back in January of 2013 when they almost hit 51%. I was a home miner still. I was venturing into some other business ideas in the Bitcoin space and seeing what I could get involved with. And then I had people approaching me asking if I could, host mining equipment for them at one of our physical Bitcoin exchange locations that we set up using local Bitcoins and some other things. And from there, I really started looking at it as, okay, well, I want to fight the centralization of mining, but not everyone's going to be mining at home, and I want to give them the ability to still be involved in mining and hopefully be able to fund some cool things down the road that will allow us to keep things decentralized. So Knights of the Satoshi was really just a bit of a play on words to defend the network from centralization, defend the Satoshi essentially, and from there it expanded into this new Liberté mining and Liberté hosting. Because one of the downsides with cloud mining is that there's no real way to verify these organizations actually have the equipment. And that's one of the things I want to work towards using, whether it's smart contracts, whether it's these elliptical hardware devices that you can install, these chips that you can install into electronic devices. I want to somehow make it so that people can verify that these machines actually exist, whether it's through an auditing system where somebody actually comes in and does an audit. But I think we need to look at new innovative ways of doing that. Instead of using the old school method of paying a company to come in and do an audit, why are we not using blockchain technology to verify that these machines exist, right? So I think we're starting to see the Internet of Things, which is $1 billion industry, and you're seeing some of these large companies come in and start investing large amounts of money into it. I think using some of the technologies that are being developed for the Internet of Things, we can implement that into a decentralized model using blockchain technology to verify these physical assets exist. So Liberté mining and Liberté hosting is kind of that new branding that we came out with to try to develop that stuff. And yeah, I've been very excited. I've played around with a couple different models. We played around in the decentralized exchange business, where there's actually got the dog here. We've got we played around in the Next Asset Exchange when it first launched, and it was a really cool system, a really cool technology. I love the decentralized exchanges. I don't think people use them enough or understand them enough. It allows you to trade in a peer-to-peer fashion without having a central authority. Unfortunately, there's a lot of uncertainty in the regulatory environment with Bitcoin itself, and then you get into these decentralized models, decentralized exchanges, and you just get into a whole other world of chaos, I guess you could say, in a regulatory environment. So we've kind of ventured away from counterparty, and we're slowly moving away from the Next Asset Exchange until we get more clarification in the regulatory environment. And we've gone to this centralized exchange that will allow people in the future to withdraw their mining assets in the decentralized market. So that's where the Liberté mining was going to come out on the decentralized markets, and we've had to kind of change gears. But
So,
Knights of Satoshi offers yearly contracts where you pay up front for your hosting and your mining equipment, and it's a one-year contract, whereas Liberté mining is more of these service contracts that are for lifetime as long as Bitcoin mining remains profitable. But we do charge a hosting fee on top of your weekly or daily revenue.
okay, great. Yeah, okay, so I wanted to go back to that auditing topic, because I think that's really interesting, because I've asked a few other people that are into cloud mining pretty big, and even an ASIC manufacturer, and they, I said, how would you do it, and what are some options? Because currently there's basically nothing. I mean, there are some providers that have letters from hardware manufacturers that say, yes, we did deliver the machines, so we know that at least the supplier says they delivered this much hash power theoretically. We don't know if it arrived or where it is right now, but at least that. But besides that, I haven't really seen very much auditing. On some cloud mine services, you do get a worker. You can at least watch your worker, and of course, you still don't know what's behind it necessarily. I mean, you could also fake that. I mean, it could just be ones and zeros on the screen, but still, it makes you feel a little bit better. And one idea that someone had was, okay, you have to point your hashing power to this pool for X amount of time to prove that you at least have this much hashing power. And what happened was then someone from a cloud mining service said, no, 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 we don't want to do that. It's secret. It's secret how much hashing power we have. Because it's a big competition. We don't want to expose our pure power to the competition. Do you think that's a justified fear, or do you think that's just kind of smoke and mirrors?
It's hard to say. My personal opinion, I'd say it's smoke and mirrors, but because we're very open with our customers. One of the things I did, I posted the shipping labels, the tracking numbers, so customers could actually see these units are being shipped. We've done videos of our setup. I've been trying to be as transparent as possible. Unfortunately, it's hard. I'm very biased, obviously, right? Because I'm doing it and I'm putting it out there myself. So I would like to see some sort of third-party auditing system to come in just to give us credibility, and that way we have the ability to say, yeah, we do have this equipment. With regards to the mining power, it's hard. It is hard to say. Maybe these larger pools don't want people to know how much they have. Personally, I don't see how showing how much power you have is going to you know for security reasons, give away where your location is if you properly mitigate bounce the hashing power and stuff around. But to give you an example, with P2 Pool, there is no way to cheat P2 Pool. You can't just, fake hashing power. And that was one of the reasons I liked using P2 Pool, is that you were actually able to verify that these people are mining. And it's also easy to verify that they're not skimming Bitcoins off of you, because when you're sending processing power, you're sending it to a Bitcoin address. So when there's a block that is solved on P2 Pool, there is no middleman in between having to do the payout. It just goes straight to the Bitcoin address. So there is a public ledger that can't be changed or altered to show how much Bitcoins were actually mined. And then you can go to P2 Pool and look up that exact same Bitcoin address and see how much hashing power they physically have. And there's no way to cheat that. So it's very similar to the way Bitcoin works, just from a mining aspect, where it's a public ledger on P2 Pool for mining power.
All right, great. Yeah. So, what's your prediction for the Bitcoin difficulty in the next 2 months and the next year? So, we had the last three adjustments. We had two down and one up. The down ones were, I believe, like 0.2% or less than half a percent, but it was historical because it was the first time in I think 2 or 3 years that it went down at all.
Yep.
And now it went up again, about 1% or 2%. I think in 2013, beginning 2014, where things were getting really crazy with the price, you had these massive difficulty adjustments. So I was wondering, what do you think is going to happen? I guess it depends on the price a little bit because, it's kind of uncertain. Okay, now we're kind of at the 250 range. What's going to happen next? Are we going back down to 150 or are we going to the moon? And, what is the difficulty going to look like, you think?
I think right now we're hitting a bit of a plateau in the aspect of the development in the ASICs. So since 2012, that's end of 2012, early 2013, that's when we started seeing all the ASICs coming out. That's when you started seeing the huge spike in hash rate, because we started with 110 nanometer chips, then it went down to 55 nanometers, and we continued going down. We're getting to about I think we're at the 16 nanometer mark. So most of them are developing on 20 and 28 nanometers because they're more efficient and they've been around longer, so cost is cheaper. But I think we're going to hit a plateau soon, the 16 to 14 nanometer chips. So when that happens, it's going to be very similar to when we went from CPU mining to GPU mining. So if you look way, way, way back, the difficulty when we were doing CPU mining was very much a stable. There was a rise, but it wasn't as dramatic as we've seen. Then when GPU mining came out, there was a huge spike again. And then we finally plateaued. And we rode that plateau for quite a while. Difficulty continued to increase, but not at the exponential rate that we've seen. So when ASICs came out, we went through that same process where the difficulty just was an exponential growth. I think we are hitting the plateau, and probably, I'm going to say we will see an increase in difficulty probably this summer when some of the newer, more energy efficient stuff comes out. But I would say by 2016, 2017, we're probably going to hit that plateau. That's when small improvements in efficiency with the electricity rates, by playing with some of this newer technology, maybe playing with, I don't know if you've heard of the Open Computer Project and stuff like that with Facebook, but playing around with some of that stuff to get maybe a 20% drop in electricity and efficiencies, or who knows what's going to come out by then, right? Like that's what I want to see, more development into the energy sector to help Bitcoin miners.
All right. Yeah, that would be good. Someone from the energy sector to try, maybe, start a mining operation. That makes sense. If they have some extra energy that they're wasting, they could just turn on some miners, maybe.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So if we wanna host a miner with your company, or if we want to buy a cloud mining contract, how do we do it?
So right now, knightsofthesatoshi.com offers the yearly contracts where you pay up front. Hosting's all paid for. You don't have to get charged hosting fees. So every Bitcoin that comes out of it is yours. With Liberté Mining, we are going into beta soon. We're just getting the security aspect of it confirmed, and we're still working on some of that stuff. But it's basically going to work like a Bitcoin exchange, where you go to libertémining.com, deposit some Bitcoins, purchase some gigahashes, and then on a daily basis, our payout calculator will just make a payment to your account, where you can then withdraw it from your exchange account or use it to buy more gigahashes. With the Liberté hosting, you can go to libertéhosting.com, and we offer 1 month, month to month, or 3-month contracts, and that determines the price. We are launching this February our new 2.5 megawatt facility, which will offer, I do believe, the most competitive rates in the market, especially because we're in Canada. Being in Canada, we actually offer $78 and $88 a kilowatt per month, depending on the contract term, which being in Canadian dollars, right now, Canadian dollars about 20% lower than the US dollar. So think about it like a 20% discount right now. So I do believe we offer a very competitive rate in the co-location hosting for your miners. You're looking at about, for the 3-month contract, 9 cents US per kilowatt hour. So most people are paying 15 to 20 cents, and even actually some places in Canada they're paying that. So
Okay, great. So if you want to go to any of those websites that were mentioned, just check out the links in the description below. Also, please thumbs up and subscribe to World Crypto Network. Follow us on Twitter at World Crypto Network. What is your Twitter?
Ryan Scott 1120.
Right, it's also going to be in the description. And check out the other videos on World Crypto Network, the Bitcoin Group, Bitcoin Rush, This Week in Crypto. And until next time, this was Transmission 23. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.